Good day, students. Dr. Lee Jones on the line with you. Let's call this discussion our discussion of Chapter 2, where we will engage, some speaking about the scientific method, how we can situate political science as a science in the locale of the scientific method. Let's take our theme for this discussion, though. Let's take our theme from the Guinea-Bissauan theoretician, the West African revolutionary political organizer. Let's get our theme from the thinker called Amilcar Cabral from the West African country of Guinea-Bissau, where in one of his lectures that we'll cover later on, one of his lectures, he tells us, no matter how hot the water from your well, it will not cook your rice. Amilcar Cabral. No matter how hot the water from your well, it will not cook your rice. What did he mean when he said that? Part of where we're going here is we're getting ready to say that at the heart of political science lies the question. The better the question, the better your research activity. If you find a way to ask good questions about the nature of the empirical world, then your question will determine the quality of the answer that you bring forth. You know who asked us a good question in the annals of soul music, in the history of rhythm and blues? We're talking about Marvin Gaye. Let's look at what Marvin Gaye asked us in 1971 in the song called What's Going On. His existential question is what's going on, because Marvin Gaye said, mother, mother, I'm not going to sing, there are too many of you crying, brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying, father, father, everyone thinks we were wrong. Oh, but who were they to judge us simply because our hair is long? Oh, we've got to find a way to bring some understanding. Here today, Marvin Gaye is asking us what's going on. He's charging us. He's posing to us an existential crisis. What is going on? Now, let's use that to tell us that political science, at the heart of scientific inquiry, is the question. Depending on the researcher that you read, perhaps you ask, what's wrong with the nature of reality that we need to find an answer to, right? What is the explicandum that we are engaged in analyzing, where explicandum means the thing that you are researching, the point, the object of your research. Remember, please, that the quality of the question determines the quality of the answers that you produce. If you ask bad questions, then you will be led to bad answers. However, if you grow the capacity to ask good questions, then you're going to come up with really good answers. Your effort to pose good questions is situated around dual focal points. There's two focal points you want to look at, right? The first thing is you want to wonder whether or not you are engaged in a normative assessment of something. And then secondly, you want to question whether or not you're involved in an empirical observation. Let's go with normative issues. A normative assessment means that you're concerned with making a value judgment about the thing that you are analyzing. You are concerned with the ethical foundations surrounding the activity, surrounding your explicandum, surrounding the activity that you are investigating, the ethical foundation. You're concerned with what's the right of the situation, what's the wrong of the situation. You're looking at something that's happening and you're saying to yourself, what could go wrong if certain other activities keep occurring? You're looking, if you're engaged in a normative assessment, you're saying what should occur, what would occur, what shoulds and woulds occur, right? Given a certain set of circumstances. You're looking at something happening, and then you're going to judge that thing and say, what's the best thing for this? What's the best activity for this thing to be engaged in? You're looking at right now, summer of 2020, you're looking at large scale protests happening in all major cities in the end of May 2020, right? The last weekend in May 2020. The question is this the optimal activity? What is the end goal? What is the point? What is the nature of the angst and the fear and the frustration of the people such that it's boiling over to such a point? So a normative issues means you're concerned with making a value judgment. What is this? Is this thing right and wrong? You're looking to make a judgment about the nature of the empirical world. Now, an empirical observation means that you're not exactly making a judgment. What you are exactly doing is looking to observe something. That which is empirical is something that is observable to the five senses, right? You're saying that this thing, I know what this thing is because I can see it, I can taste it, I can feel it, I can hear this thing, right? And if something is observable to the five senses, then you're going to say that thing is. This thing exists. How do you know it exists? Because I can use my five senses and I can observe that thing. So an empirical observation then is concerned with the observable, and the observable is factual. And then that which is observable and factual, that is the primary focus. That is your primary focus. An empirical observation then is looking to look at, for example, the structures that causes a particular thing to occur. So number one, George Floyd is choked to death by the knee of a police officer in a street in Minneapolis. What caused that activity to occur? Racism, police brutality. And then because that thing occurred, empirically, what's likely to happen next? Oh, I imagine people will be upset about it, and that might make them come out of their house, put down their fork, push away from their television, come out of the house and actually want to yell in the street about it. And then you look at what happened, and then you look at what in fact empirically did happen, what did happen, and then you see, well, all American cities, the end of May 2020, were ablaze in popular indignation at the police brutality that exists in American cities, of which the choking of George Floyd is an example, okay? So the empirical observation is you're going to use your senses to get at the that which is observable, and the things that are observable are factual, and that which is observable and factual is the primary focus point for your analysis. Okay. Once you know that your two focus points are to be normative on one hand and to be empirical on the other, then your goal is to come up with a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is a way that you organize the concepts that help you understand the world in which you live. Your conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is the effort to use symbols to use words rather as symbols of things that signify your reality. Remember in chapter 1, we said that we're engaged in, definitional political science, right? Descriptive political science, where we're looking to define the meaning of words, because words signify our reality. So if we can define a thing, then we can control that thing. If words signify our reality and we can define our words, then by extension, we can control our reality. And the effort to control, the ability rather to control your reality means that you have seized power over yourself, over your circumstances and your community. All right. So your conceptual framework then is the effort to use words as concepts that signify a reality. And then those concepts are put into a particular order that produces an understanding. If that understanding is strong, then the order that the concepts are put into, they will stick. And then this ordered set of concepts that produces a dominant understanding, this is called your conceptual framework. Now, we're about to do some conceptual frameworks that are particular to political science as conceived in the Western world. However, the Western world is not the only world. Remember that there are African ways of understanding life, African ways of answering the existential, philosophical, maybe even cosmological questions of the day. There are African ways to understand politics. Let's give a few examples. Number one, let's use the phrase Ubuntu. Ubuntu, the Ubuntu of the Zulu people of South Africa. For example, it says, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. That means that you take the individual, locate that individual inside a community, and it's only because that individual is situated inside a community that that individual has meaning. The individual's meaning is then predicated upon the meaning, the importance of the community that he is in. Take that individual outside of that community, his meaning then is by definition diminished. The Akan people of Ghana in West Africa, the Akan people of Ghana have a saying called Sankofa. Don't get me acting like I know how to speak Akan, right? But the Akan saying is Sewo Were, Fina Wo Sankofa, Ayenki. Or in English, it is not a crime to go back for that which you have forgotten. The Akan, the Sankofa saying then means the symbol is a bird that is facing, see if you can see me, it's a bird that's facing, well, its body is facing forward, but the bird's neck is turned back, looking behind him. Like he's forward facing, but he also has his eye on history. Right, so the Sankofa phrase means that history holds answers for you. You know, one of our famous heroes of African American history, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, once wrote this book called Message to a Black Man, in which he tells us that history is most qualified to reward all research. That means, take that back to the Sankofa, that means that history, if you want to answer questions about the problems that confront you today, one way to begin that answer is to turn backward to history, to antiquity, and to look at how your people have answered those questions in the past. Right? So the mental ability to move from African ways of understanding politics or African conceptual frameworks, that is part of the goal of college. That is why you're taking classes like this. Let's take that theme from W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois. In 1903, Du Bois wrote the famous book, Souls of Black Folk, where Du Bois said the function of the university is not simply to teach breadwinning or to furnish teachers for the public schools or to be a center of polite society. The function of the university, it is, above all, to be the organ of that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life, an adjustment that forms the secret of civilization. Right? So Du Bois tells us that we have to grow the mental acuity to go from different conceptual frameworks so that our civilization quotient grows higher, right? Du Bois. Now, having spoken about African conceptual frameworks, the Sankofa principle and the Ubuntu principle philosophy, let's look at what we're doing in the class. Let's look at what your textbook says. Your textbook is going to move you from traditionalism to behavioralism to post-behavioralism as conceptual frameworks important to political science as science. So let's read through these slides together. The traditionalism as a conceptual framework has been around since at least the late 1880s. We define traditionalism as the effort to understand politics or to understand power by focusing on the constitutions, the laws, the formal structures, the institutions of government. For example, if a traditionalist wants to understand the answer to a political question, that traditionalist then is going to go to the Constitution of the state. The traditionalist, if he wants to understand a question, then he's going to look at the law and he's going to say, should this thing happen given the laws at work? right? So the traditionalist is typically normative in approach and historical in scope. The traditionalist is concerned with the formal rules that guide how the institutions at play, how they actually work. The traditionalist is going to look at constitutions, laws, and the branches of government. What does the traditionalist want to know? The traditionalist wants to look inside government. He wants to look at how state actors are grouped in such a way that determines their actions. The traditionalist wants to look at how institutions arrive at the decisions that they do, given the legal structural framework within which they operate. Let's contrast traditionalism as a conceptual framework against behavioralism. Behavioralism, operating at least since the 1940s, 1950s, is the effort to understand not the formal rules, structures, constitutions, laws of a place, not that, but behavioralism is the effort to understand the actual behavior of political decision makers, the actual behavior. Behavioralism then is concerned with the decision makers, their activities, what they're doing, and why, more than rules and actors are more than rules and laws that the actors are supposed to be concerned with, right? The behavioralist accepts that there is the law, but then there's the action, and then there's a difference between the two, right? Traditionalism is not exactly helpful to help you analyze police brutality, right? Police brutality is against the law. However, police brutality happens over and over again, right? And so if it's against the law, yet it continues to happen, then the behavioralist says we need to know how often this thing occurs. So we need to know so that we can know how big the problem is. So the behavioralist is going to look beyond the Constitution, beyond the laws, beyond the formal structures, and look at some other things to get at how political actors behave. And so the behavioralist then is going to stress an empirical assessment, where the traditionalist might stress a more normative assessment, what should occur. The behavioralist is going to look at, is going to engage the statistical analysis, is going to engage a numerical analysis, is going to put charts, graphs, Venn diagrams, is going to stress empiricism and look to collect data to arrive at the conclusions that they do. It's common for the behavioralist to maybe reject is too strong, but let's say to neglect the historical analysis and just to look at the data surrounding the issue to arrive at various conclusions. The behavioralist tends to neglect, to omit an ethical supposition and look at the observable, right? So you see here, let me get my pointer thing. I want to make note of this. So what you see here is not the should, but the behavioralist is looking at the what. Behavioralism is looking at the what of it all, right? Empirical analysis of observable phenomena. All right, I didn't mean to hit that. Okay, now I'm back on. Let's pay attention to post-behavioralism. Post-behavioralism is not a coincidence that it arises during the civil rights movement, where people are questioning the fascist actions of the government in the United States. The post-behavioralist is distinct from the traditionalist and absolutely, distinct from the behavioralist. The post-behavioralist looks at the behavioralist claim to be free of values, and they say this itself is a value-based claim, right? The post-behavioralist says that the effort to look at the observable, the effort to say that which is observable is reliable and distrust that which is moral, that itself is a value-based supposition. The behavioralist holds that the post-behavioralist holds that the pure empiricism of the behavioralist only captures the observable. The post-behavioralist asserts that the traditionalist only looks at the formal structures, but the post-behavioralist says there is more to observe. The post-behavioralist says that there's actually at work unobservable phenomena that no doubt strongly impacts the political choices that people make, strongly impacts the power dynamics at play. So the post-behavioralist looks to make the political scientist relevant to the issues of the day by merging empiricism and ethics at the same time. The post-behavioralist wants to engage citizens in the places that they live. So let's move away from conceptual frameworks and let's look at how the scientific method is applied to politics. The scientific method is the means by which one is systematic and methodical in the effort to understand power. What we said in chapter 1 and what we'll continue to say throughout the course here is that political science is the systematic and methodical effort to analyze power. We're saying that power is the ability to manipulate choice, and we're saying that the choices that matter are those that allocate those that affect the allocation of scarce resources in the country. And then we'll further, towards the end of the class, we'll look at political decision makers, because those who have the authoritative ability to make those decisions are the primary political actors. All right, so the scientific method, when it's applied to politics, is in its simplest form a set of procedures that are used to gather information so that you can answer the questions that beset your mind. Political science is based on epistemology, right? Epistemology, for our circumstances, is the study of the truth. Now, true epistemology as a branch of or a type of philosophy is concerned with bridging the gap between the truth and the belief, right? And so what's in between the truth and belief? Observable phenomena, empiricism, or what we call knowledge. So for our purposes, epistemology, we'll use a shorthand, is to say that we're concerned with the truth. Epistemology then is the study of the truth. The epistemological effort then is the effort to use concepts, words, names that signify the reality to help us understand the nature of that reality. So political science uses the scientific method that's characterized by epistemological empiricism. Where epistemological empiricism means that which is true is that which can be observed. That which is true is that which can be observed. Epistemological empiricism. Now, how do you observe that? How do you get at that truth? What kind of mechanism do you use to make those observations? Well, that requires that we need a mode of inquiry, a means by which the data is collected. We're going to need to be discerning in how we collect that data. So you need to distinguish what you need from what you don't need. You need some things to bring into the analysis, and then you need to leave other things out. So that requires a method of your empiricism, and we're going to call that methodological empiricism. So epistemological empiricism is based on methodological empiricism. Epistemological empiricism is the study, is the truth of that which can be observed. And the methodological empiricism then means the method by which you observe empirical phenomena, right? So epistemological empiricism is based on, it bespeaks your methodological empiricism.